Hello guys and welcome back to the Rovers Report, where in today's video we're joined by Tom to do a bit of a reaction to the release list and to do a sort of informal squad analysis video. We will be doing one in the future on potential signings, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. But for now, let's go through the release list, mate. So do you think there was anything initially that stood out for you? Maybe someone was released that you didn't expect or anything like that?
I think some people were surprised with Whelan being let go. I don't know whether that was a mutual thing. It may well have been, considering I know he'd been commuting from Cheshire all year to play and train for Rovers. So I think it was very much sentiment might have clouded a lot of people's judgment with that initially. And it's quite clear that he's still very, a good League Two player and definitely good enough to play in League Two. And maybe the step up to League One might have been too much. I mean, that's obviously not ignoring the fact that he's had a very illustrious career, played in the Premier League for 10 seasons or so. So I think that was initially surprising, but then you have to think we've got Finley and Coots in that position for next season as well. And we'll probably look to add another player in there as well, the likes of someone I'd personally like the look of is Ben Garrity or Louis Reed from Swindon. So I think that was one that initially surprised some people.
I think you're right on that. It's just the sentiment thing, isn't it? I think if we want to be ambitious, playing a 39-year-old in centre mid in League One isn't really going to work. We can find someone that do a similar job for him that will be obviously much younger than him, and we can look to build for the future. I think you're right. A lot of people, because he's who he is, Glenn Whelan, it's like, oh, of course we need to keep him on.
Yeah,
we can find a better replacement for him. And I was a little bit surprised. I thought he might have gone into a coaching role, but like you said, with the knowledge that he lives quite a long way away, I think for both parties it makes sense, doesn't it?
I think he may well end up playing for a League Two team up north. So not sure off the top of my head, which clubs, but somewhere a little bit more local. Or maybe probably I was going to say maybe in the conference, but it's quite clear from that last game of the season, I thought it was absolutely fantastic against Scunny. So I think it's quite clear that he's got another season left in him at League Two if he wants it.
Maybe not necessarily as a starter every week, but his value in that squad, his experience, and like you said, he's still a very good player, isn't he? So I think you're right. I think he's got a place in a League Two team.
And you have to think Coots is 33 to turning 34, I think. Finley's 30, so still in the middle of his peak. But obviously Coots might have a couple of seasons left and think about something else. So it was an interesting one, but I think it was probably the right decision mutually. And I'd imagine it was probably a mutual decision as well.
Yeah. Quite amicable, I imagine.
Yeah, completely. And that was the one that stood out for me. I mean, we obviously let Leon Clark go, and some people might think, well, that leaves us with just Collins as a sort of first team starter. But that was obviously going to happen with, I think, Leon Clark's injury problems.
Yeah.
He did fairly well when he was given the chance, but unfortunately, he was obviously injured for pretty much the whole season.
I think I had it sort of categorised, and I had Clark, Pittman, Nolan, and Junior Brown all in the same category for me. I think they've obviously all got quality and they're good players, but I just don't think any of them proved their fitness enough to Barton. And I think pushing forwards, you can't have sort of clinger honours who are not, especially players like Junior Brown and Leon Clark. Yes, they're decent players, but when you only get 4 or 5 games out of them a season, it's not worth it.
Exactly, and you have to think with someone like Brett Pittman, they encourage a completely different style of play, and that does work for somebody, for some teams. I'm not sure actually how well he's done at Eastleigh, but I just remember, I'll never forget last season, that game against Swindon at home when they just completely outplayed us. We were playing Pittman on his own up top.
You just can't press, can it?
It wasn't great at all, if I'm being honest. And so I think that was the right decision. He's obviously a high earner as well at his age. He's had a very good career, but I can't see him playing above League Two level next season. So that's obviously the right decision. When Collins, obviously the season picked up when Collins sort of hit form and started scoring goals around end of November time. So I think that was none of them really surprised me apart from Whelan slightly. And so, yeah, obviously Junior Brown, I hadn't heard him. I don't think he's in a matchday squad for last half a season. I don't know. Did we send him out on loan? I can't remember.
No, I think he regained his fitness with maybe sort of like 7 or 8 games to go. But by that point, I mean, there's no need for him in the squad, is there? So
Yeah.
I think it's very wise of Barton. I think in years gone by, we've sort of seen putting your reliance on these journeyman strikers or players that you take a bit of a gamble on. And I mean, it's ruthless of him as well. You think with Nolan, he's had him in. I think was it initially on a 6-month contract?
Yeah, it must have been.
So he's looked at him and he's gone, you know what, you might be a good player, but you're not fit enough. So
yeah,
and he's very keen on that, isn't he, Barton, about how he has the fittest squad in the division.
Yeah,
these players that can play upwards of 30 games. So in the sort of the eyes of Barton's vision, those will make sense to me. I think
they're picking up a fair wedge, all of them.
Yeah,
this is, and this I know we'll speak about this probably another time in terms of players to bring in, but you know, what's worked for us in the past was players on the up, players from League Two conference, and so that's a sort of player that we should be targeting to bring in instead of keeping on players who are journeymen. And obviously, I actually think that the notion of being a journeyman isn't obviously. It's actually, you know, it's not that bad. You know, you get to play professional football for a number of teams across the country. It's just the mere fact that when you're coming towards the end of your career as a journeyman, you're obviously going to be demanding quite a fair wage for yourself. And I don't think it's actually fair a lot of the time that just because you perhaps played at a higher level for a little while, that you should be coming to a club and asking for above average wage, when, you know, the reality is that's the sort of concurrent corresponding effort that you're putting in isn't, well, it's not corresponding because you're not matching it. And so I think, that's the right decision. I guess I wasn't really surprised. I'm same with the youngsters as well. I know obviously Kieran Phillips scored a lot of goals in the youth teams. And I was reading on the forum that Southampton were interested in him a few years ago. I was surprised that he wasn't really given that as many opportunities.
I agree with that, mate.
So that was one that didn't surprise me when he was released. It was more the surprise that he wasn't given opportunities throughout his time at Rovers. I know he made the first time he was on the bench was that Ipswich away game back in League One 2.5 years ago, and I think he was a second-year scholar then, and that surprised me. And Lucas Tomlinson as well. I played with him, a long time ago. It was no surprise that he was offered a pro, and again went out on loan to Bath and Gloucester. And you think, he might get some opportunities. Did really well in the pre-season game against Swansea, sort of 2 or 3 years ago now. And again, it's unfortunate, and you have to think that the second half of the season, Joey wasn't going to play any youth team players anyway, being in a promotion hunt. But obviously, having said that, Luca Hall was a starting right back for pretty much the whole season. So I think it was surprising that they weren't given opportunities perhaps in the first half of the season. It's obviously sad to see people who were at the club for 10, 11 years, probably more, being let go. It's not nice to see. But again, it wasn't really a surprise that they were part of the list, unfortunately.
No, I think I agree, Matt. I remember when I was younger, I'd always sort of complain about the fact that these youngsters aren't given a go. But the reality is it's brutal. And I think you have to have a bit of luck on your side. Luca Hall is obviously an extremely good talent, but I think you need that sort of bit of luck where a position opens up. I'm sure, I had this in my notes, I'm sure that one of those players released will come back to bite Rovers, not necessarily against us, but I could easily see an Ollie Hulbert going on to play League Two or League One level. But the crux of the matter for Barton is if you can't see them getting in the squad immediately or within the next year or so, just they need to go, don't they, really? So I think probably most of them aren't up to standard, but I'm sure 1 or 2 will come back to
that. And it's not fair on them, actually, if they were even offered a 1 or 2 year extension, because that would be 1 or 2 years doing exactly the same thing in terms of being loaned out. By that I mean sort of false promises, and then being loaned out to the local, the national North and South teams. So I feel like it's always, for the majority of those occasions, it's actually a mutually beneficial thing, because it means they can go and kick on, they can go and play semi-pro in sort of national league north and south, maybe even National League Premier, Conference Premier, whatever it's called nowadays. So I think it's always, because I think sentiment clouds a lot of things in football, and that's definitely a key example of that, is a lad being released by his hometown club, and having really played that many games, you think, oh, his parents have been driving him up and down the country for 13 years, and you know, it's crap, it's never nice, but it's a mutually beneficial thing. So I'm going through a breakup, right? So you gotta realize that you know, a lot of players in that, that's happening up and down the country. Every club has 3 or 4 players like that. So I think it's actually a beneficial thing for everybody that happens. And it happens every year. You see,
that's, I mean, I've been following now for like 14 or so years, and you see it every time, don't you? So I did see a very funny post on the forum which said that Mansell, Riddington, and Hargreaves will be swirling around the Rovers release players like chips, seagulls on chips.
Mansell's at Gloucester, Widdrington's at
Kings Lynn.
I
don't know if he's departed them actually, but he was there.
Yeah, I think he didn't take responsibility for relegation. I mean, he has a track record of doing that, to be fair. So that was bizarre. But yeah, I'd imagine that some of them will go to Gloucester or.
Schulbert's already been playing at Gloucester for a bit, hasn't he, this season?
Yeah.
And I think Tomlinson, did you say, went there? And
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised to see Hargreaves link up with his dad at Yeovil. I think we've probably covered that release list now. And I think if we go into the sort of analysis of our current squads, then we can touch on maybe some of the, because I know in the release list they put the players that were going back to their parent clubs. I think we can probably touch on that. So if we start with the goalkeepers, I think I've said that Belshaw, Yukola and Ward for me. I think there's a bit of debate around Yukola's probably, I think he probably will sign an extension. And for me, I think that's an adequate 3 goalkeepers. You've got 2 quality goalkeepers in there, 1 good youth option who will only get better. So for me, I think it's a good set of keepers.
It's interesting because I wouldn't be paying Anzi. I'd imagine Anzi's on a fairly good wage, even for League One. And I wouldn't be paying him that to play on the bench. But at the same time, you have to think we wouldn't want to throw Jed Ward into the deep end if Belly's injured and Jed Ward was the backup.
Yeah.
I'm sort of tempted to not offer Anzi a new contract and bring in another keeper who's probably on the same level as Jed Ward and get them to compete for the backup spot. I just think paying Anzi a first team wage to sit on the bench next season isn't fair on Rovers' finances. And also, well, I'd imagine for Anzi it's okay because he's still got a few years left in his career being a keeper. But I think, you know, you could get a move to another League One club probably.
Yeah.
On his day, he's easily, you know, a League One keeper. But he has I think he did struggle when he played last season, and in the relegation season the year before he was injured as well. So I think we need to sort of free up some wages, and you know, my opinion is we shouldn't offer him a new contract. But obviously, Joe, thinking
off that. Fair, mate, and I think you're probably right. Is because of the last couple of years with Belshaw and Yukola, we've been spoilt with goalkeepers. So in my head, I sort of think it's the norm to have 2 wonderful keepers. But actually, I mean, you're probably right, aren't you? The standard of goalkeeper, a backup goalkeeper in League 1 and 2, is probably around Jed Ward's level, maybe a little bit better. But yeah, I think the wage thing you're spot on with. Actually, if he's on this like a significant amount, we can't afford to have him on that and be sitting on the bench.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tough one because in his first half season before COVID curtailed that season, when we were obviously second in League One on the live table on Boxing Day, you know, he was absolutely fantastic that first half season. Then he's just been injured since then. It's really unfortunate because technically he was probably one of the best goalkeepers that I've seen at Rovers that first half season. So yeah, I think it's important to not let sentiment cloud your judgment. I think it's not worth offering him a new contract, and I'm sure he'd find being a Finnish international as well. He's not Finnish; he's only 32. So, so yeah, so he can. I'm sure he'd find someone that's where he play every week. Because Belly, in my opinion, is the championship keeper.
Yeah,
and so
I think you've swayed me there, mate.
What's that?
I think you've probably swayed me actually to not offer him. I think you're right. There's other keepers out there who will do the same job as him for much significantly less.
And ultimately, it comes down to money. It's a money business, and that would free up some wages to bring in a Louis Reed type or Ben Garrity type. I mentioned a couple of times. Someone who or a striker to play up top with Collins. So it's all about kind of like manoeuvring the finances, I think, and it's probably not the most efficient use to have Ansley sat on the bench next season on a fairly high wage, I'd imagine.
Tell you work in the city, mate. You know your economics. If we move on to fullbacks, and again, you've got Trevor Clark here, who is ongoing in discussions. But just for the sake of it, let's include him in the list. Let's imagine that he does sign on. I've got down Trevor Clark, Anderton, Luca Hall, and then as an option, we can have Josh Grant in there. I think for me, I'm happy with Hall at right back. I think he's only going to get better. I'd like to see us bring in a cover for him. Just someone just to bulk out the side a little bit. And then
would you say Harry Anderson would be an adequate backup? Just in case.
I think yes, he would, but I don't think Rovers benefit as a team for having him in that position.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I sort of think, yeah, you're right. If we need him to play there, I think he can, but I would bring someone in so that we don't have to do that, because I think Harry Anderson's much, much better further up the field.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, and I think I agree with Hall. He's only going to get better. He's 20, I think, 21. Yeah. And yeah, I thought it was absolutely fantastic second half of the season. And I think the only improvement that I can really see in this game is if we cross the ball more. But I know that we don't really tend to cross the ball that much as a team, or at least maybe that's on face value. It seems like that. The statistics might not corroborate that, but he's a fantastic defender. He's good in the air, good pass of the ball, plays it simple, keeps it simple. He's just a solid player around, really, and I'm looking forward to seeing how he'll get on in League One next season. Me
too, mate. For left backs, for me, I think it's interesting because I don't think we've seen the best of Clark or Josh Grant. I don't think either of them have fully got up to their maximum potential, and I'd be interested to see, because I think if they stay the way they are now, I'd be looking to bring in an upgrade and a starting left back. I'd want someone to replace them. But you see signs of it in Clark that I think he could be a very, very good left back, especially
in League One as well, mate. You get more time on the ball. It's a lot more. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more attacking in League One. Teams aren't very. In League Two, everybody's sort of shut up shop. I feel, especially away from home.
Yeah, definitely.
League One is a kind of different game, and I think somebody like Trevor Clark would benefit from a more expansive game. I'd be tempted to. It seems like we're trying to keep him on. Josh Grant's an interesting one because he came back from injury and had a pretty poor couple of games towards the end of the season, and I think that clouded people's judgment because he was pretty solid throughout the season when he was fit, and he's very versatile. I think just having that player with versatility is important. Because he can play left back, right back, and in the middle as well. So in the middle of midfield. So I think it's interesting. Would you? I guess we'll speak about this in our video. But is there somebody off the top of your head who you would bring in ahead of either of them, or would you say Anderson would be our starting left back? Because I thought Anderton, in that 6-week period when we were playing Saturday, Tuesday, Anderson was the first choice left back, and I thought he did brilliantly during that spell.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I think you're right. Anderton, he didn't disappoint when he started, But I think it might just be because he's not the most flashy of players. But there's something about me I think we could do better. Off the top of my head, I can't think of anyone specifically.
Yeah.
And having said that, I think if we went into the season with Grant, Anderton, Hall, and Clark as our starting fullbacks, I wouldn't be too upset with that. I just think if we're looking to push higher up the division, if Trevor Clark isn't the level that we think he could get to, then maybe another left back would help us out. But
yeah,
like I said, I wouldn't be too disappointed. I think if that's an area where we do have some options. But I think when you move on to centre backs, I think almost every Rovers fan would say, look, that's somewhere where we're really going to need to improve on, aren't we? Just add players, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. The two starting centre halves are now back at their parent clubs. Seems that Connolly's being offered a new contract at Cardiff. They also have an extension clause in the current one for another season.
Oh, is that the case? They're offering him. I didn't see that.
I think they're offering him a new contract, and then Colin Taylor's under contract at Stoke, and I think could definitely play or be in their squad next season. Maybe not starting, but definitely on the bench.
Yeah, I don't think we're getting Taylor back. I think Connolly, the more time's gone on, the less optimistic I've got with Connolly. But I think Taylor's definitely not. I think Connolly's probably 30-40% chance we'll have him back.
I feel like Connolly benefited from playing with Taylor quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I'd want if we were to sign Connolly, I'd want another big centre half to play next to him. Because for me, Connolly's obviously very good defending, but what stood out for me the most was his distribution. And he cool, calm and collected. So I definitely want a bit of height at the back if we signed Connolly, and I'd probably try and bring in a big centre half. Something off the top of my head would be either of the Northampton Town centre halves, but then again, they didn't play very good football last year. I mean, if they did, they might have scored more goals and end up being
That's a good one, didn't you, mate?
Yeah, I did. So either of those two, I know off the top of my head.
Who was that? Was that Hawthorne and Guthrie?
Yeah, that's right. But I'll never forget watching the iFollow and when we played them away and thinking I was incredibly surprised that they were third in the table with the football they were playing. But then that just comes to show League Two, you don't have to play good football to be promoted.
No, I think you're right as well.
Up the trend slightly because I don't think FGR played good football.
No.
Exeter did. But yeah, I think we need a beefy centre half to play with beefy if we signed him. But yeah, centre half. I mean, Kilgore as well has been another player unfortunate with injuries over the last couple of seasons. I mean, generally throughout his career as well. He didn't make his Rovers first team debut until he was 21. He had a very good again, similar to Anzi, very good first half season before COVID curtailed 2019-20. And then since then, obviously, I think everybody was poor, and apart from maybe Luke McCormick and maybe arguably Rodman slightly and Anzi, I think everybody was poor in that 2020-21 relegation season. And then Kilgore was pretty much injured a lot of last season. So
yeah, I think for me, I'd be looking at getting in 2 starting centre backs, and then I think obviously you've got Grant and Anderton who can fill in there. But I wouldn't be relying on Kilgore to be playing and starting. I think because of his injury, he's going to need some time to get back up to pace. So I'd be looking to get in 2 centre backs.
Yep.
2 starting centre backs. And then if you look at, say we got those 2 in, I don't know who it would be off the top of my head, you'd have those 2, Kilgour, Grant and Anderson. And that's a decent 5 centre backs to have, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think they have to be good ball playing centre halves. That's the style that we want. We can't afford centre halves who aren't good with ball. First and foremost, a defender should be a good defender, but we demand more than that. We should be demanding more than that, and that's what we got last season with Taylor and Connolly. So I think it's imperative that we bring in ball-playing centre halves.
I think you're spot on there because actually, when it's in positions like this where we're riding the momentum of last season, you want to have some continuity in the way you play. And I think for us to sort of try and change it would completely go against everything that's made us successful.
I think it's important to not pigeonhole ourselves. by playing that way. But at the same time, if it's a winning formula, then there's no need to really change it. So, Coots is still going to be trying to receive the ball off defenders. I know it's only a simple pass, but if you're playing it short and quick, then it makes it a lot better. And I think we got that with Taylor and Connolly, and I think we need that next season, whether that's both of them, either of them, or two new centre halves. So that's imperative, and that's the position we need to strengthen the most, because obviously Kilgore is our only centre half contracted club at the moment.
And I'd expect Joe Barton to move on that quickly. So I have faith in him there. I think, and then moving on from defenders to, let's go with our centre mids. And that arguably is our strongest area of the team, I'd say, at the moment, especially if Evans signs on, which I think I'm confident about. I think the two things for me that I made notes on is, I think we need a backup for Coots and basically effectively a replacement for Whelan, because he's obviously in great physical condition, but that position is a tiring one, and he's obviously not young anymore.
Yeah.
And then the other thing for me was, I think it'll be interesting to see how Westbrook comes back into the fold.
We spoke about this. It's an interesting one, because I feel like 2 seasons ago, had Westbrook played with Coots and Finley, we would have seen the sort of the Westbrook that was at Coventry. I still think he was unfairly judged by a lot of fans in that relegation.
He was scapegoated a lot, wasn't he?
He was scapegoated a lot. He's not a great tackler, but he was one of the best passers in the league in terms of key passes. I think the 6th best midfielder in the league for that. Got close to 10 GA as well, in a team that had strikers who didn't score goals.
Yeah.
And so I feel like he was scapegoated slightly. And
it's just classic, mate. It's the one where, he doesn't show enough passion. He doesn't fly into tackle.
Yeah.
And it's one of those where, I don't know, I probably fell victim to it too, but you often don't appreciate the sort of more technical details of a player.
Exactly. And from what I remember in that season, he played in a 2 with McCormick, who was quite a similar player.
Yeah. And
really much balance. But if he played in a 3 with Finley and Coots, we'd probably see the best of Zane Westbrook. But you have to, and we spoke about this, you have to question after a season sort of in a stasis, I guess, where he hasn't really, he's definitely stagnated.
Yeah.
You've got to question where is his role in the team. I just hope that, I feel like he's worth giving another opportunity in the squad. And it's sad to see that a player who was one of the best midfielders in League One in that promotion season for Coventry wasn't even starting for Stevenage at the bottom of League Two towards the end of last season. I don't really know what's going on, but for me, he's a very creative player on his day. He's a very neat passer of the ball. His set pieces probably weren't as good as they were at Coventry, but I think he's worth having around the squad. I think like also at the start of the season when Joey told him to move on, we didn't have prime Coots, we didn't have prime Finley.
Yeah.
I feel like it's another one where he's probably on a fair wage as well. And so it's actually a very interesting one, and people haven't really mentioned Westbrook over the last 6 months. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Joey handles that, because I feel like he needed to rocket up his backside, Westbrook, but it's definitely a case of a player who has a year left in his contract, and he has to prove himself now. He's had one season in League One, and arguably average season. In my opinion, he did better than that, but from a fan's perspective, the season afterwards, and then he barely played last season. So I think like it's a really interesting one, and I feel like Jerry can get the best out of him. A bit like how he was getting the best out of Luke Thomas towards the end of the season after basically saying that he wanted to send him back to Barnsley.
Yeah.
So I feel like the book shouldn't be closed on Zane Westbrook's time.
I like that.
Finished.
I think what Barton will do on this is, because I think like you said, the wages will be a big thing for him. I think he wants to shift him, but I think he'll be clever enough to leave him around the pre-season training and include him in his plans. And who knows, if he doesn't go out, then we might see him, mate. We've got 10 minutes left in this, so if we just sort of club together the strikers and the wingers, we can do an assessment on that. So
if we spend 30 seconds on Evo now, I feel like it seems like he's been offered a very good contract, and we're offering a very good package. I really hope he stays on.
Yeah.
If not, we're going to have to, I think, spend a little bit of money in that area of the field, in terms of the creative midfielder, and perhaps spend a bit on a transfer fee. What do you think?
For me, I feel I don't think he'll go. I think he's obviously very settled here. I think a big club would have to come in for him. I don't think he's going to move to if a championship club came in for him, I think he'd go. I think that's too much of a risk for a championship club.
I feel like also he's only really had one good full season.
Exactly.
Where he's played every game. And so it would be even now, it would be a big risk for a championship club. I feel like he should be given an opportunity to prove himself in League One.
And do you agree that I think, the clubs in League One, you've obviously got like your Barnsleys and your Peterboroughs coming down. You might potentially have your, I don't know, I don't know who he'd necessarily move to in League One for. So I think we'd be offering him very good wages. And like I said, I don't think a team that could offer him, like the sort of 5 to 10 grand a week, I don't think any of them would ever take a punt.
No, I don't think they would. For a player that, don't get me wrong, I think he was absolutely fantastic last season, but he seemed perhaps a little bit inconsistent before then and hadn't really found his way to a club and played regularly. So I feel like on a risk-adjusted basis, he should definitely just come to Rovers for another season or two, maybe 1-year contract with. Well, I'd imagine if he wants a lot of money, he want it on a 2-3 year contract. But yeah, he's definitely worth a 2-3 year contract off the back of last season on a fair amount of money. We know what he can do, and I feel like, as we said, League One's a lot more expansive. Can only really benefit him from playing at that level.
Yeah, I think if I was Joey Barton, I'd be saying to him, look, you've tried a lot of different places and a lot of different setups. You've clearly found one that works for you. But I don't know how you put it to him without offending him. But you say, look, it's clear that you might only necessarily fit into this setup. Get on well with me. So who's to say that if you went somewhere else, you'd have to adapt to their style of play? Yeah, so I think there's a good chance that he stays. And I think if you look at our wingers and our strikers, Nicholson, the only real move I could see him doing is going back to Scotland. I don't think he impressed massively year to get a signing higher up than us. And then you've got Anderson and potentially Rodman on the wings. And you've got Loft, Collins and Saunders up top. So I think I'd be looking to bring in probably 1 or 2 more wingers maybe.
Yep.
I'd like one proven striker, which admittedly is never easy to find, as we've seen the last few years. But I'd want someone to sort of complement Collins and take a bit of the pressure off of Collins and Loft, to allow Loft to sort of flourish without people getting down and saying, oh, he's not scoring the goals and stuff. He's clearly a striker for the future, isn't he? So yeah, I think that's the additions I'd be looking to make up top. What would you agree with that, or do you think
I definitely agree with that, mate. I think for me, Nico's another player I think he would do better in League One than League Two. We saw that when he played pretty much half a season, then got injured and was, I think, our best player. I completely forgot him when mentioning the better players in that season earlier, but he was probably our best player. And so maybe with McCormick. So I think he's worth keeping for another year. I know even though I'm sure he'd admit that he didn't have a great season last year, he's still one of our highest scorers, still a regular in that team. For me, that what turned that season around, it's pretty obvious to say, was that 6-week period of Saturday, Tuesday games, and he was a starter during the majority of that time. He was only really dropped after the Newport game when he had a pretty poor game and missed a sitter when it was a little bit harder than that. But I agree. I think it wouldn't be a huge loss, but at the same time, I feel like he's definitely a much better player in League One.
Just on Nicholson, I've seen a few people commenting that he almost performs better as a second striker type player. Do you think there's anything in that?
We saw that when he was in his purple patch, and scoring goals in League One. He was a lot better playing as a second striker than on the wing. And also, we started that season playing 3-5-2. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Or 3-4-3 under. It wasn't under Coughlin. It was under Garner, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was under Garner.
So he was being put out on right wing back, and you think, well, he's a winger. Why is he? When you put a wing at wing back, they obviously have to defend.
Yeah.
Not. So I think that he may well be kept. I think if we keep him, I think we should be playing him as a second striker. But at the same time, we don't really play with a second striker. We play with a cam.
And he's not suited to that role. I don't know. Well, he could be, but I think you obviously pigeonhole Evans in there, don't you, if he's playing?
Yeah. I think it's worth keeping Nico on for the season.
I'd agree.
And yeah, I think he'll probably move back to Scotland in some time, but I feel like he brings depth, and he's a better player in League One, and he can also play that second striker position.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Rodman's. I'm surprised. I'd be surprised if he was offered a new contract. I've been a big fan of his since he's been at Rovers. Obviously, he didn't really play last season, but the 3 seasons before, he was incredibly versatile. He played right wing back, right mid, left mid, centre mid, up top. He's the phrase consummate professional was being thrown around quite a lot, but you can tell that he has his head screwed on, and he's been a very good signing. But I wouldn't offer him another year. I think with the injury that he had and stepping up against League One, it might not be worth offering him a new deal.
I think the ones we can agree on as well would be Collins and Loft. Definitely keep on. For me, Saunders is a strange one, because whenever I think of Saunders, I sort of think, oh, you know what, he's only young. Let's just give him time. But he's not. He's 24. Like he's almost a forgotten man this season, wasn't he? He's on the bench every week, but
he played a little bit at the start as like a wing back, and he's a player who seems quite versatile. But also, I think a player who benefit from being a regular player elsewhere. As you said before, with a couple of players, they could easily get a contract at a League Two club. And so if he went there and started scoring, every week, I don't think we should really blame Rovers for not offering him a new contract. I think it'd be mutually beneficial, perhaps, if he went elsewhere, maybe on a loan deal for a season.
Yeah.
Somewhere like, I don't know, sort of a mid-table team like Harrogate.
I think I'd keep him on board, just because there was a few times in the season where you saw his injection of energy and pace was useful. And I also think you never know what happens in pre-seasons, do you? Sometimes you get a sort of, no one would have predicted Hull would have come through and been the player he is. You sometimes get it where a player will have a great pre-season, fit into the squad, and then they're off from there, aren't they? So I think that's been a good assessment, mate. I think we're going to have to finish it now, because I know you've got stuff to do and I've got to get off. But that was really enjoyable, mate, and we'll definitely be coming back to do one on potential signings for Rovers. So thanks for joining me again, Tom. It's been really good.
Thank you as always.
And I hope you have a good day, mate.
Likewise.
Catch you later, pal.